To jest ostatnie wezwanie na panel. Wszystkie osoby, które są zainteresowane, zapraszamy tutaj do środka pod merch. Panel będzie w języku angielskim, ale polecam bardzo mocno tą rozmowę. Osoba artystyczna, z którą będzie rozmawiała Natalia Ślewicz, jest bardzo szczególna. Bardzo jestem szczęśliwy. Wszyscy jesteśmy bardzo z tego powodu usatysfakcjonowani, że udało nam się zaprezentować ich performance i tutaj, i w Muzeum Sztuki Nowoczesnej w Warszawie jakieś 2-3 tygodnie temu. Zapraszam, jest ważna scena. Welcome. Dansu, Natalia.
Thank you, Robert. I will switch immediately to English to avoid any additional confusion. But I'm thrilled to be here and share this grass stage with Dansu. As Robert mentioned, Dansu performed, we witnessed their incredible monumental performance 2 nights ago. But also in Warsaw, we had a chance to experience the performance in a very different surroundings, in an institution, in a concrete building at MSN, which was forecasting of the festival that is very much related to the topics that were already expanded by Robert and Emilia in the panel yesterday, but I think it's strongly felt in our bodies as we bear witnesses and have this incredible chance to witness generosity of our performers. And Dansu is an incredible polymath. They are they're majestic forms that transpire on stage, as you have witnessed. They are informed by multi-layered, deconstructed sounds and genres of music, but also, as you've probably witnessed from the first moments of the performance, by gestures and body movements that stemmed in a way from choreography and your background in dance and choreography, but also their practice is also informed by computing, machine learning, and their backgrounds in statistics, which may sound a bit surprising, but I feel we will explore these themes as well today. I am still very much moved by the performance, even though I feel like my body has, become a vessel for further performative acts that we witness. But today we will also talk about not just about, I guess, like the processual and formal aspect of such a monumental form and piece that we saw on stage, but also about the affective and spiritual idioms that are so important, in particular sonic grief that is a thread going through your work, also through your literary work. You're also a poet and writer. And I guess I want to talk a bit about that. But first, it would be amazing if you could introduce your artistic journey in a bit, how you arrived at what we saw on stage 2 nights ago. Mostly how, the body and the gestures of the body involvement with sound and complex sonic forms, but also voice that, as you may or may not know, were freestyle forms, where the voice so closely linked to identity. Voice is probably the only one of the very singular aspects of our objecthoods and personhoods, how that basically elaborates together with other very complex elements of your work in what we saw. But perhaps you could offer us a bit of a retrospective of your journey as an artist.
Yes, that's a long way to go. Since starting, I started performing as a kid, and but then I went into academia. I studied quantitative methods in the U.S. It's University of Wisconsin-Madison, and as simultaneously I was dancing and also practicing artistically. And then I moved to Berlin, and then I complete a complete degree in Master of Choreography at the UDK and Hochschule für Schauspiel Ernstbusch. So after that, I'm like actually when I was studying and making dance piece, the sonic aspect emerged, because I was looking for sounds that telling something different than I could find. So I started to making soundtracks for my own performances, and then from there I went fully into sound, and now it's basically where my sonic journey arrived. And to address the question of gesture, I think it touches a few aspects of my practice. First, it is the action of writing. So the action of writing, it's for me, very physical and materialistic, like on paper and on textile, or on, I like metal, because metal also makes interesting sound, also on metal, and also spatially. And I did choreography, like calligraphy in a huge cube box, but that's interplay of automatic writing in a bodily way. So this practice in writing, it almost analogly always carrying the material side of the gesture form. And then there's another aspect, analog signal into the digital system. So like first when I started to making my very first dance piece, but actually it was a game that allowing audience to participate with the interface of iPad, and they can basically use their gestures to trigger the sound system. And so then that's a threshold between the analog and digital. Also now evolving to now I focus on my own movement practice, that how I expand my somatic status with a movement sensors, and how the digital or technology can help me to transform my analog signal into a more expanded state. And then and then to touch another dimension is the spatial dimension. That's to place a gesture into a specific site. We have to be aware, like the uncertainty in a specific situation. So that is to learn from the uncertainty or the specific site. So all this dimension, analog, digital, technology, and spatial, like shaped together, how gesture may, as almost a symbolic thing, can transform into different dimensions.
Wow, that's great.
And then you have another question on voice, right? And
We can maybe jump
Yes.
to that later, but I wanted to touch upon these three thresholds that you mentioned that I find so interesting, especially that they unpack binaries which we often associated with digital and analog, and yet they somehow, syncretically appear in your work, deriving from what you describe as some form of automated writing, or in general writing that comes from development of the deep states of unconsciousness when we think about automated writing in this traditional sense, but also the material aspect of the resistance that both the interface, even material interface, offers the body when the body inscribes certain forms of language, either on metal or on paper, or even in space, if we treat sonic space as a writing screen. But also something that you just touched upon that I find very interesting in relation to rethinking computing and our milieus as systems in which we operate. Namely, you mentioned learning from uncertainty. So through the statistical method that you quite often encompass in your work, Bayesian quantitative method of assessing one's system, if I understand correctly, it's a way of recursive learning that happens every time you have to confront yourself with a new set of data or givens. So like an example for that would be, I know that like in technology, for instance, if we want to use like a very pedestrian common example, self-driving cars use GPS models that are based on these Bayesian quantitative statistical methods, but I think, like for me, it's a very poetic way of actually thinking of us as agents, bodies, but also actors in broader sets who maneuver through life and have to reassess the uncertainty of being in the world with others. And it's also such a beautiful example of performativity par excellence, learning from uncertainty. Can you talk about it? Because I feel like it's such an important aspect of your work.
Yes. So Bayes philosophy actually existed a very long time, for 100 years. And then also now there's Bayesian statistic methods or inference. Basically, how we derive from what we know as the past knowledge and to the future, and based on the data we gather today. So it's basically think about a belief updating, like what we know about yesterday is a prior distribution, and then today we gather, we experience, and the present, and we gather the data as much as we can to update our past belief, the belief of yesterday, so we can infer what might be like for tomorrow. So basically, it's a model of updating our beliefs. There is no single belief or there is no single truth about the world, but it's continuously recursive learning based on what we acquire from today.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of addressing, existential aspects of cybernetics, I feel like, because when we dive deeper into that, then we have to question even like the concepts of past, present, and future, because as you say, like the time is not linear, it's very circular, and the yesterday, I mean, what we said just now is already in the past in traditional sense. So like we are continuously recursive machines who acquire knowledge and have to self-actualize. And I want maybe to move from this aspect into the concept of grief, because it's a very important part of your artistic practice. Grief, it is a lingering feeling that often is also non-linear, and you can find oneself in a temporal loop when experiencing grief. I think of it especially in terms of queer grief, that is a big part of your project, but also how we experience grief while witnessing an ongoing cycle of death and genocide, or rather genocides, where on one hand it's hugely televised and mediatized right now, but as we know, the apocalypse is, an internal state of things. It existed always to some subjects. So with that in mind, I want to ask you about grief, how it features in your work. Why do you also use the term sonic grief? And last but not least, how it relates to the concept of time, especially when we think of performance itself. I'll touch upon that later, but maybe as an intro.
Yes, I think how I arrived to the theme of grief, it has, I think, started from a few 5-6 years ago when I started the inquiry in structural violence, and how actually my first work, Dark Twisted Mind, where I mentioned when audience are invited to, as a participant, to give their gestures to this sonic system, and basically it was a system designed to investigate the compliance, how the audience as compliance of the system can create structural violence, actually, that is very invisible and hard to identify the specific cause. And then since then, I developed my work along this trajectory of structural violence through a sonic operatic performance called Gentle Brutality, also an interactive stage element with metal pipes that cross movement and sound. Then to my internal inquiry of fractured voice, like it goes from outside more into my own voice, and then arriving to my solo record, Shang Tan, it's called, and now that's finally arriving to a grief status. I think it's quite personal journey from the inquiry of structural violence to today that I think it's a necessity. I feel like the work I need to do to even to understand what does it mean, why do we need grief, like when I'm doing this work.
And do you think that in order to access these more universal tropes of grief that we can feel collectively, precisely you have to address the personal elements of grief outside of one can never fully, for those who incur structural violence, one can probably never separate the structural violence from personal violence. But of course, as we go through lives, we experience different forms of harm or self-harm that quite often, like through this idea of focus on the psyche and on our own subjecthood, we, sometimes maybe we fell into this like internal navel gazing aspect of recursively thinking, through the grief. However, I'm actually, like, personally, I think that it's kind of like impossible to feel more strongly with others unless one integrates certain aspects of personal grief inside. I was wondering, what is your thought on that, and precisely why do we need grief?
I think the power of grieving is exactly it is very personal, but the power, it is the collectivity. When we can face the horror together, it's such a can be such a beautiful thing, and also sometimes can be sacred. So of course, like when I'm thinking investigating this theme, or like putting it as a practice, so touching back to what we were discussing about the recursive knowledge, for example, how I think embody the breath, or so it's like how I put the systematic thinking or recursive systematic thinking into a performance has strongly need to associate with body.
Right.
Yes, body is the site of the knowledge. And we are, as a collective, we need to build the space for each other, for different truths to exist, and to face the horror together, no matter how horrible. But it can be transformed, because while we need the grief, I think nowadays we move too fast. What comes new, and or we are distracted so easily, but giving attention to what is disappearing or even what is displaced, very simple, giving attention together, and the meaning might collapse, but that's where the wonder is. The meaning might collapse and new things can come up from this ground. So I think the power is that we shape the space together through grief, that we allow ourselves to collapse, and through these remnants, and to watch what comes anew.
Thank you. I think this question of body being a site of knowledge only we have access to as beings, even if we perceive ourselves as nodes in different systems, is so important. And in fact, in your performance, I think you really play with different expectations of that, because on the one hand, the voice plays such an important role in your performance. A voice, a site that is so closely linked to the identity and the body. It comes from the inside, from the inside of the body, and then is warped through different bodily structures of our insides. And yet, you expand your body on stage, for instance, by different accessories. You mentioned the sensory movement sensors that act as psychomatic, as extensors of different psychomatic gestures and devices on one hand. But also, I have to also ask you about the mask. So the mask that in a way conceals the identity and yet is a powerful statement, and also can be expanded through different objects that sometimes you attach to the mask. You mentioned that you have a big affinity for metal as a material, but also so maybe if we could talk about this maneuvering between opacity, visibility, and how that links to the body as a site of knowledge.
So to address the mask question, for me, simply it is a way to resist that how am I seeing as not as just a single identity, because we always have multifaceted identities, everybody, and also as the mask, so you transcend to see me as just a performer. Maybe you see something different beyond the shape and beyond my face, beyond even the voice. So let's say the voice actually, what I'm singing is a fantasy language beyond the specifically or literal meaning. How we hold multiple plural meanings through, the shield.
But you also mentioned something in our private conversation that I found very interesting. I hope it's like okay to share that the mask actually, in terms of articulating the voice, helps you or makes you feel safer in a way. I find it so interesting and yeah, so counterintuitive in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was performing, actually, mask made me feel that I can concentrate my internal states. Because for this performance, like, it's a great work. I would call it like a ritual epistemic practice. So I am myself learning through why I am performing, because there was no set score to follow. I know how I want to start, that's all. And how do I follow through? I think I really follow through the evolving internal states of myself. It is like a breath that has different elements, that contains movement, like sonic shapes, and every breath it updates after the other. It's like the Bayesian inference, like the next breath isn't fully determined at all. So I have to be so focused on my internal states. And it's all about the states that I am in and also the transitions. So let's say it's how we cross the threshold of different intensity and emotional density. And it isn't linear. It's not from one A to B, but recursive, one after another, updating my belief, updating my breath, and really be so present about the current breath I'm taking, how it infer the next one.
At the same time, I think the performance embodies a very sophisticated structure formally, and so I think that for me it's always like more than intensity as a form. That there is like a specific, even if not linear, there is a specific architecture that you create through this self-learning, self-actualizing psychosomatic practice, which is so incredible. So maybe if we could talk about the sonic aspect that elaborates on stage. Is that also somehow? Would you also describe it as a similar breathing practice, especially how your body encounters technology, but also the body of sound around you? And then maybe if you could talk about I was going to ask you about the different codas that we have or associate with grief, that in traditional mainstream that I understand this festival is trying to counteract, is quite often elegiac or melancholic. It follows into these somber, quite often like somber sentimentalism, and yet your form is, I would say, it embodies very powerful rage. I don't know if you agree with that affective term. Maybe it's not about rage, but it's definitely about like very powerful energy that is linked to the sound itself. So could we talk about the sound itself for a few minutes? And I got like a secret signal from the audience that we need to hold our mics a bit closer to our bodies.
Yes. So for the form, I mean, it isn't. I didn't design. Okay, this is gonna be how it looks like. I mean, of course, I know my costume and mask, but the sonic form, it always reveal in the process itself. And of course, I have my sonic palettes. I know the elements I'm using, and I know the voice elements I'm using, but how it forms together on stage at a very present time, it really follows the internal somatic time. and
maybe about this your sonic palette then, and how it relates to grief, and but also do you address what other, let's say, affects would you associate what you do on stage other than grief? Is it I know it's probably like very difficult to articulate in linguistic terms all the mental states that go through your body, and this is also part of the incredible opportunity for us as the audience to witness that without premeditated or overtly descriptive way of looking at it. But I guess I would like to come back to this first question, how you arrive at this sonic palette from your interest in choreography, but also writing, and why this certain sonic palette became the embodiment for you of the form.
Okay, to address these questions, I want to touch something about memory, because grief cannot live without our memory, and often memory actually in grief, how it fails actually narrates itself in a unbroken arc. So that's why, like in my that's how in this grief process, or like in the sonic mourning, I call it, I want to let silence, abruptions, and even ruptures to carry as much weight as a sustained flow. It is like memory that I want to let memory that can reconstruct itself without forcing it. So that's how I feel while I am on stage, that without presetting what I'm gonna do next. But yes, I have samples from the folk music of my own region. I'm from Yunnan, China, and so the folk music, every time I listen to the folk music of my own region, and I don't know, I just feel like tears running down for whatever reason, I don't know. And so I use some sample from that, and for me, it's like a dialogue. It's like a memory of, oh, it seems I remember this, but do I fully know it? I'm not so sure, but I just want to let even, yes, the silence carries as much weight.
So do you feel that our bodies in a way are also responsive, or they are carriers of, or rather the folk music, especially of ancestral contexts, that I don't know if these songs were also connected to the rituals of mourning, or regardless, but whether they are stored somehow in our bodies as like intergenerationally, the fact that we so effectively respond to them, and maybe I was thinking how, in fact, the digital and the technology as a system through which you mediate that allows you or us to counter alienation and reconnect to that somehow with this cosmology. Which, again, it goes beyond this traditional binary dichotomy between the spiritual and the ritual, and the synthetic and technological. Do you see some space of these two spheres for converging? Because I think it's quite present in your practice.
Yes, totally. I think it's also a choice. I mean, we have nowadays so much technology that we could use, and also we could embody. But then coming back to the question is, what's your choice? What do you want to embody? And for me, I don't want to become a machine. Like, I can use technology, use the sensors to expand my somatic status, but not to shrink myself to be a slave to machine. So that's where I arrive from. Yes, we have these things, but the thing is, how do we want to use it? It's almost like an ethical question. Where do we stand with all the choices we have? And so here, like in the grief work, I would like to minimize it to even to avoid that what, let's say yes, I'm equipping with technology, but I would like to borrow this technology to reflect on my own self and to return to my body. That what my body remembers, how it can carry forward in a way that let me learn something new at the present, so I can keep breathing and I can inhabit that what's disappearing and to stand with it, not to escape or not to dismiss, just to simply stand with what I embodied.
Wow, that's such a empowering statement about technology. I feel like also, in the realm where we are always either, didactically reminded that the technology is enslaving us, or, we are completely dependent on big data and so on, or this uber optimistic idea about technology that can create some kind of collective intelligence that, I don't know, will change the world completely. We of course don't know the outcome, but I really like that your focus on how the technology can be deployed is still so much linked to the body and identity, even if you are also trying to find different ways of blurring the identity. But it seems that there is something in the technology itself, but by your own agency and your own standards, that can help you, reconnect with other states on your own terms.
Yes, totally.
Okay, I was going to open the grass floor to voices from the audience. I'm not controlling time, so I need the organizers to pinpoint, but maybe we can have a chat, and if not, we will continue with our questions. Any? Okay. So, okay, let's talk about, oh, there is a question. Thank you for... Tutaj pani.
Hello. Oh. Hi. It's very interesting interview, and I wanted to ask you. You said you're interested in metal and the material, and could you talk about it in a bit, maybe?
Yes, I have this practice called 3D metal series. That metal I use as raw material and also as found objects, and I extract sound from it, also perform as a collaborator with it. And it's often site-specific and really low, it's, let's say in formal term, electroacoustic spatial environment. So I can work metal as a collaborator, also objects in a spatial sculptural way.
Does it also carry certain symbolism to your practice? Before we chatted about the numerical aspects of the title of your records, your books, or also your sonic stage name. So you know how the numbers, it's dance110, but also you have different symbolic codes around numbers in your work. Does metal also somehow, do you think of it also on some, let's say, symbolic level, or are you mostly interested in sensorial, psychosomatic, and sonic aspects of working with it?
I feel metal, I relate it mostly to its quality, the material quality, because for me, metal is so brutal in a way, so related to our modern society and the structural side. And why it's interesting for me, because it's the contract of the body, the flesh, the softness, and why you work with something hard, how you inhabit or work with it with the soft flesh. And this threshold that most interests me, because my work there was like the operatic performance called Gentle Brutality, also used this material quality of softness and hardness, and because we aren't we aren't one way or another.
Okay, I also want to ask you about writing, because I know you are you're a writer and poet, and you work on types of writing that one could also maybe compare to how you treat these Bayesian methods in your performance practice, meaning how modular it becomes. It sounds very abstract the way I describe, so I hope maybe you could talk about it, because it actually reminds me of what you said in relation to your performance, where the audience was able to access the performance through different devices and iPads. And I understand you're working on a piece of writing, on a book, where the audience can also somehow decide about the flow of text and treat it as modules in a larger system.
Yes, now I have almost finished the book that is together with the sonic morning practice. And this book is a poem fiction, and it's centered around the character who does not have the memory of yesterday. So she only remembers today, and how she navigates the recursive world of one day of another. And so this book, basically it is a hybrid of some poems and also philosophic conversation, and also some fragmented narratives, and which so much related to the memories, how the memory actually fails us sometimes. So it is structured in a way that the fragments can be reconstructed by the reader. So the order isn't fixed, almost like the process of the sonic morning, that how you decide, or the audience, the witness, also need to work together with the performer and or the writer to assembling the reality together. So it's not on me, or it's not totally on you, but we together. And there is a freedom of you to, for my book, to order the realities of that character.
It's a very generous, I think, way of thinking about collective process, where the artist and the audience can go through something. I definitely feel like I've learned many things through this recursive conversation, and maybe there's one more question or two. Okay. Shall we wrap it up, or would you like to conclude with something? Okay. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Alright.
Yeah, also I really want to thank Robert for having me, and thank you for the audience and for you to be together and with me. And I very appreciate the environment and nature here, and also your generosity of receiving my grief. Thank you.
Thank you.